Good afternoon, everybody. Can you see my slides? Yeah, I'm coming through. Thanks, Georgina. I can see. I think lots of thumbs up. Brilliant. I really enjoyed that. It made the technology. We've tried technology like that, and really interested in how it works. So that's really helped some of the thinking around it as well. So yeah, my name's Pete. I come from an organisation called Speak Carbon Collective. We have been doing carbon literacy stuff for nearly 4 years now, and across the board. So we probably cut our teeth with the climate emergency in 2019. A lot of local authorities. I can see there are some people from local authorities come on declaring climate emergencies and then wondering, how they then get people engaged. So we did a lot of work with that, but we've now worked in sort of government agencies, law firms, universities, and across the board. So have some great experience around this, love working with other trainers in this sort of collaborative space. And yeah, last year became a carbon literacy training organisation because of all of the different pieces that we have. So it's good just to be able to share all of those experiences today. I am going to talk today a little bit, and I know this has been touched on before, but I feel maybe the time is right for this to come back. I think it was a couple of years ago, around a little bit of experience or sort of knowledge, I suppose, or some thinking around Climate Fresk, which we know links in with this idea of carbon literacy as well. And I just wanted to share a little bit of thinking that we've done about it. It's really at the design stage. So if I wanted to make it sound exciting, I'd say hot off the press, but really probably a bit tatty is more near the mark. So as part of Speak Carbon, we've worked really hard on trying to develop a model that we can use to clearly explain what we're trying to do. In particular, we're thinking about human intelligence. So how do we make humans, people within organizations or groups or even as individuals, feel that they're part of the solution. So our model really works in this sort of three-way. We start with the idea of learning carbon. This is about engaging people. This is about getting them on board with the subject. And as we probably all know, as trainers, giving people context. So making it make sense. A little less polar bears, a little bit more where you live. It's all built into the carbon literacy standard. The second part of this stage is about empowering people. And this is the key piece that we are continually trying to work on. A little bit like what Heidi, I think, is doing in there. What are the next steps? What are we actually doing? How do we feel empowered to take action? So that's why I thought that was really exciting. That's where that would fit into our model, that type of work. And then embedding this. So this is about culture. This is about getting into the DNA of organizations or businesses. In order to try and make this business as usual, get people to be able to take one step, two steps, and then continually being able to do this. So when we look at this in terms of carbon literacy, when we add together learning or engaging or speaking and empowering, this equals carbon literacy. So we've deliberately mapped this to the standard because carbon literacy is kind of really where we started, and we modeled ourselves around that and truly believe in these two sort of stages. But we've also come across this idea of Climate Fresk, which for us lives in this engaging or learning carbon section of our model. So Climate Fresk does do various elements along actions and thinking of that, but really as a half-day project, we have found its best and its strongest piece is around engaging people. And so we will be focusing on that side of things, really. How do we get people activated? How do we get people to understand and have that knowledge, but importantly, being able to synthesize that knowledge into wanting to go away and do something about it? So yeah, we've got the classic infographic that goes into every single one of our carbon literacy pieces. I've had to copy and paste this probably 122,000 times because it's always updating and always growing, which is fantastic. This is the latest one, so 122. I imagine it's a little bit higher than that. It's about 16,000 when I first started doing this. But alongside that, we've come across Climate Fresk. This might be something you're less aware of. It started in France. It is built around the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's reports, and because it's shorter, it's a little less detailed. They've reached 2.1 million people. Millions of people, I think, is maybe the right way to put it. And thousands of other organisations deploying this, and we're seeing this more and more in the UK, and different organisations using this to be able to facilitate around that knowledge, particularly that scientific knowledge. So this is the bit that I already told you was in progress, and I'm sharing this in the safe space that we are all in as trainers and people who understand and probably want to know a little bit more about the developmental side. So what we've tried to do is understand how our classic carbon literacy training, which is normally a PowerPoint presentation, might fit in or interchange with elements of what we do with Climate Fresk. So we had a look at our learning model, what we're trying to do, and this is over a 4-hour window. I don't know if any of you get people to sign up for the full 4 hours for 2 workshops. Everyone says, yeah, 4 hours sounds great. Can you do it in half an hour? But we always start with this amount of time. Climate Fresk can be done in less time. I think the minimum they say is 3 hours, but to really engage people, we try and eke out as much time as we possibly can. So as part of our engagement learning model, we set some boundaries, we get ourselves introduced to each other, we tell people what the space is about, and we create that safe space for people to learn. Yeah, we can't do that in much under 30 minutes. We found that we haven't. And this second stage is group discovery, completely within the DNA of carbon literacy. As we know, it's front and center in what this is about, creating that idea of peer-to-peer learning. So you're not the expert, you're not teaching people, but you are trying to take them on a journey, and that leads to better behaviours. Bit of recovery, so that's a break, but a bit of recovery time, and then some reflection. So we want people to reflect back on their learning. We want people to think about their emotions. So we use a climate change emotion wheel here. I know lots of people do some incredible things with this space. It's really, really important to allow people, perhaps after they've recovered, some time to be able to process what they've learned, because that discovery stage can be really quite difficult. Some of the subjects we are going to talk about there, as we know, are existential and difficult to process. We allow people to process that before we go on to the next stage, which is that engagement piece. We try and activate people. Now, when we are doing this as Speak Carbon, we're separating the idea of empowerment and activation. So at this stage, we're trying to activate people. We're just trying to say, right, you've learned this. What do you want to go and do? And very much our next window, and as I say, that the piece that we've just saw fits to this for me, is about then trying to empower people to take that action. And that's slightly different from activating people. And yeah, more than happy to talk into a little bit more depth about that learning model that we've developed, but it fits into this idea of engaging people. We have some time for a debrief at the end. So that's what we're trying to do as facilitators, and some people work that way. We've got sort of a session plan that comes from that. This might seem familiar to some. We've all shared lots of things with lots of different people. And we have this introduction icebreaker, and we usually use a slide deck. We've got some printed materials. This is just to get people to have those boundaries that we set in the room, tell them about the fire alarm, all of that, where the toilet is, all of that sort of great stuff. But the important piece is making sure people feel safe and they're ready to go into the next stage. And we've broken the next piece up into 3 parts. So we've got the science basis, the IPCC piece, the impacts that we might see, and again, one of those key themes around climate justice and that lens and how we use that. And you know, simply that's how it's happening, what's happening, and who it's happening to when we look at it. In terms of the materials, this is where Climate Fresk and the slide deck that we might have separate slightly. But Climate Fresk allows you to do this piece in around 75 minutes and ticks off quite a few of the goals that you've got in terms of that sheet that you fill in every time you fill in a new course for a new audience or a new client. And we've we're working and trying to work on a way to make sure that at the end of this section, whether you've been through a slide deck or whether you've been through the Fresk, you've come to that same part of group discovery at the end of that. So we know it doesn't really matter which journey you take. At the end of that piece, we've enabled you to learn something for that just over an hour. And obviously you deserve a break at the end of that piece. Really important to give people as much of a rest as we can. We're trying to find actually a place to put a second break into this as well, and allowing people to do this reflection. And this is, we found, mirrored in carbon literacy as a slide deck and in its Fresk. And we go back to actually using the same sort of materials here. And then this big piece of pre-pledge workshop. So we're trying to get the pledges in, the idea of taking action in as early as we can. And we found that with Climate Fresk, you are encouraged to do this piece. And we're also trying to bring it more into our slide deck. Now, the issue is a little bit is the squeeze of the group discovery phase. This is still a group discovery piece, but as facilitators, we're trying to activate people. So you're not learning new stuff at this stage. You're trying to synthesize what you've learned and put it into some sort of context where you are with some next steps at the end. And you can either use the slide deck that you had before, or you can use stickies. You could definitely use a Miro board for all of these pieces. And Climate Fresk, I know, probably on Miro or something like it, you can definitely do this digitally as we saw before. And this is where they sort of come back into each other. So we've got this sort of set session outline, and you can use your slide deck, your, classic carbon literacy, or you can use Fresk to be able to build that collage, and you can then use that to go off and do all of these other pieces. So I know people do this in lots of different ways, but it might help to share a little bit about what we do. So that's ultimately the plan that we've come up with at the moment. And we're having a few questions about this. And sometimes people finding it difficult to do, Fresk and how to fit this in. And this is how we're beginning to model this. In terms of timings with the 4 hours, if you're interested, this is when this becomes a bit more messy. We've got, sort of 30 minutes at the beginning. That takes us to a total of 30 minutes. We're trying to get these sections into 25 minutes each, taking us up to that 105-minute mark before we get the break. Whether you think that's too long for a break or not, it would be an interesting thing to discuss. We give 30 minutes for this reflective piece. And actually, we're thinking about maybe doing the knowledge check at this stage. We haven't discussed all of this in terms of how it might work in carbon literacy, but we're quite interested to know whether we could do that. What could society do here? But we definitely do a well-being check-in. We spend quite a long time getting people to process their emotions, and we find that bit empowering, allowing people to move on to the next phase, because if you take the activate bit too early, it won't work. Giving us over an hour to do a pre-pledge workshop, and the different ways in that can work, sort of post-its, coming up with ideas, finding ways that they feel as participants, they can give this context and meaning to themselves, bringing us, and as we know, this never actually works in practice, to the 4-hour piece. You end up doing double the time that you thought you would do on well-being, because everyone wants to talk about that, and then you worry about where you're going to squeeze it later on in the course. But this is the actual plan to come out. So yeah, I've got 4 minutes left, and I've gone through all of this at quite a pace. I'm hoping that if you've got a little bit of training experience, this might make sense. Perhaps if you're right at the beginning of the journey, this is a little bit overwhelming. So I absolutely understand that you can come to both of these pieces. But if you do want to chat a little bit more about how this works, I've delivered this a couple of times with carbon literacy, and it's worked really well. We've had incredible feedback using this hybrid model. I'd love to talk to other trainers about their experiences, the bits that they could add in and help us with as well. So any questions is great now or towards the end. Send me an email. I'll pop that into the chat a bit later so you can pick it up easily. And I'll also pop in our training professionals course that we've got running in the summer, where we develop a little bit more those ideas of how, as a facilitator, you go through those different phases, and how you might move from knowledge into activation and empowerment as well.